The training hall stretched nearly half a kilometer across the Orbital Combat Institute. Park stood in formation with 40 other cadets, representing species from every corner of the galaxy. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like walking crystals, but they all held weapons the same way, one blade in one hand. "Today we study advanced blade work," Instructor announced. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. The stood 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms extending from his broad shoulders. 2 arms held training swords while the other 2 rested behind his back. "You will learn the 7 classical guards. These positions have protected warriors for 3,000 years. Watch carefully as the instructor demonstrated. Each movement was precise and elegant. Moved his right arms together, then his left arms together, creating perfect mirror images. Even with 4 arms, he never moved them independently. First position called out, blade high, shield ready. The cadet's his stance, raised his training sword overhead. Beside him, a 6-legged did the same with her blade. On his other side, a floating whisperkin held its energy sword in a tentacle. Different bodies, same technique. This doctrine works for all species, continued, walking between the rows, because it follows natural law. One weapon, one focus, one purpose. Another human cadet stood 3 positions down from. She caught his eye and gave a tiny shrug. They had both noticed something odd about galactic combat training. Everything assumed you could only focus on one thing at a time. The drill continued for 2 hours. Attack patterns, defensive stances, footwork, all designed around single-weapon fighting. Performed each move correctly, but his mind wandered. Back on Earth, he had spent 10 years studying historical sword fighting. He had competed in tournaments across Asia and Europe, and in every one of those competitions, he had used 2 swords. "Cadet Park," sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "You seem distracted. Perhaps you find our training too simple." "No, Instructor," replied quickly. The other cadets turned to look at him. "I was just thinking." "Thinking is good. Speak your thoughts." Hesitated. He had only been at the academy for 3 months. Humans were the species to join the Galactic Union, still on probationary status. The human squad leader had warned all of them, "Don't make waves. We're being watched." But the question had bothered him since day one. "Why don't we train with 2 weapons?" asked. The chamber went silent. Several alien cadets made sounds that their translators rendered as laughter. One of them clicked her mandibles in what seemed like amusement. His 4 eyes narrowed. "Explain your question, cadet." "Many species here have multiple limbs," said, choosing his words carefully. "You have 4 arms, Instructor. They have 6 legs and 4 arms, but we all fight like we only have 1 hand. Why?" "Because we only have 1 brain," replied. His tone suggested this should be obvious. "Tell me, Cadet Park, can you write 2 different sentences at the same time, one with each hand?" "Well, can you solve 2 different math problems simultaneously? Can you hold 2 separate conversations?" "No, but—" "Then you understand." Tap 2 of his swords together, creating a sharp ring. "The brain can only focus on one task. This is biology, not choice. When you hold a weapon, your mind gives it complete attention. Try to split that attention and you become weak at both tasks. This has been proven across all 47 member species." "But humans used dual weapons in our history," persisted. "It worked for us." "Primitive combat against primitive opponents," said dismissively. "Here, you face trained warriors from advanced civilizations. Your historical techniques are charming stories, nothing more. The galaxy learned long ago that dual-wielding is impossible for any thinking species." Raised her hand. "Permission to speak, Instructor." "Granted." "How was it proven impossible? What were the tests?" Expression softened slightly. At least this human was asking to learn, not to challenge. 3,000 years ago, the first galactic war forced all species to optimize their combat methods. Every technique was tested in battle. Dual-wielding was attempted by at least 15 species. All failed. Warriors who tried to use 2 weapons died against those who mastered one. The mathematics of neural load proved why a brain fighting with 2 weapons operates at 40% efficiency with each. One weapon receives 100%. "That makes sense," called from the back. He shot a warning look. "Thank you for explaining, Instructor." "We will continue the drill," announced. "Second position, low guard." The training resumed, but his mind kept working. The math seemed logical, but something felt wrong. He had dual-wielded his entire competitive career. He never felt like he was fighting at 40%. If anything, 2 swords had made him more effective, not less. After the session ended, pulled aside in the corridor, the squad leader's face was stern. "What are you doing?" demanded. "We talked about this, no challenging the instructors." "I wasn't challenging him. I asked the question." "You made us look ignorant in front of every species in that hall," ran a hand through his black hair. "We're on thin ice here. Earth only got accepted into the Union 2 years ago. Half the member species think we're too aggressive, too reckless, and you want to argue about fighting styles. I want to understand why they're so certain about this, said. It doesn't match our experience. Approached them carrying her gear bag. He has a point. I've been reading the Academy database. Every combat manual says the same thing: dual wielding is biologically impossible, but they never explain why humans could do it on Earth. Because our enemies on Earth were other humans, replied. Is right about that. Out here, we face species that have been fighting in space for thousands of years. Maybe our old methods don't apply anymore. Or maybe their methods are based on their biology, not ours, countered. Pointed a finger at him. Drop it, that's an order. Focus on learning what they teach, not questioning it. He walked away, leaving and in the corridor. You're not going to drop it, are you? Asked quietly. Would you? Replied. She smiled. No, but I'm not the one who just painted a target on his back. She lowered her voice even more. If you're serious about this, be smart, don't argue in class. Do research, find proof, not opinions. Where would I even start? The archives. This station has 3,000 years of combat records. If dual wielding was tested and failed, there should be documentation. Maybe that will answer your questions. Nodded slowly, and if it doesn't answer them, then you'll have bigger questions, said, but at least you'll know what you're talking about when you ask them. That night lay in his quarters, staring at the curved ceiling of the station. Through the viewport, he could see Earth's moon in the distance, a reminder of home, of the dojos where he had learned to move each hand independently, where two swords had felt as natural as breathing. The instructor had said dual wielding was impossible. 3,000 years of galactic civilization agreed. 47 species had tried and failed. But kept thinking about one simple fact: none of those 47 species were human. Maybe impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. The archives occupied an entire ring of the Orbital Combat Institute, walked through halls lined with data crystals, each one containing centuries of military knowledge. He had applied for research access, claiming he wanted to study historical battle tactics. The request had been approved without question. Cadets were encouraged to learn. Looking for anything specific, the archivist, an elderly with silver skin, looked up from her console. Combat doctrine development, replied. Specifically, the testing of dual weapon techniques. This expression shifted to something like sympathy. Ah, you're the human who asked about it in class. Word travels fast on this station. Is there anything in the records? She gestured to a private study room. Third War Campaign Records, subsection 47. But I'll save you time, young cadet. You'll find the same conclusion in every report. Single weapon superiority is not opinion, it's documented fact. Spent the next 6 hours reading battle reports. It was right. Every test of dual wielding had failed spectacularly. They had tried fighting with blades in all 4 hands. Their warriors became confused and died quickly. The tested 4-weapon combat, even worse results. Species after species had attempted it during the desperate years of the First Galactic War. The conclusion was always identical. Neural interference makes dual-weapon combat impossible. Warriors attempting such techniques show severe degradation in reaction time, accuracy, and tactical awareness. But something nagged at as he read. Every report described the same type of failure. Warriors would start a fight well, then become disoriented. They would swing both weapons at the same target, wasting effort, or they would freeze, unable to decide which weapon to use. Their brains couldn't handle 2 separate tasks. Made notes and returned to his quarters. That evening, he sent a message to an old friend on Earth. 2 days later, he received a response. Lee, now a military historian at the Terran Defense Academy, sent him a compressed file. The message read, "You asked about dual-wielding neurology. Attached is Dr. Sora Hand's research. She's stationed at the Academy now, Medical Wing, Deck 7. You should talk to her." Dr. Sora Hand turned out to be a neurologist who had transferred to the Orbital Combat Institute 3 weeks earlier. Her laboratory was filled with brain scan equipment and holographic displays of neural pathways. "Park," she said, reading his profile. "The cadet who questioned, I wondered when you'd find me." "You know about that?" "Everyone knows about that," she smiled. "Sit, let me show you something interesting." Dr. Sora pulled up a holographic brain. "This is a neural map. Notice the structure." She highlighted several regions. "See how the left and right hemispheres connect, very efficient for mirror coordination. When moves his right arms, both arms receive identical signals, perfect synchronization." She switched to another image. Brain, different structure, same principle. Their neural commands branch to multiple limbs but always in matched sets. They think, attack, and several arms move together. They can't move limbs independently. They can, but it requires conscious effort for each movement. Imagine trying to pat your head while rubbing your stomach, except both actions are life-or-death combat decisions. The cognitive load is crushing. But humans are different. Dr. Sora pulled up a human brain scan. Very different. See this structure. The corpus, the bridge between our brain hemispheres. It's significantly larger and more complex than any known alien species. We also have something called lateralization. Our left brain controls the right side of our body, and vice versa. I don't understand. Most species think of limbs as extensions, tools they command. Humans think with both hemispheres simultaneously. Your left hand isn't just obeying orders from your right brain. Your right brain is independently processing combat data and making decisions for that hand. She pulled up a video of a human fencer. Watch this. His right hand attacks high. Simultaneously, his left hand defends low. Two completely separate actions, requiring different timing and different responses to different threats. His brain isn't splitting focus, it's running two parallel processes. Leaned forward, watching the video. So when said we can only focus on one task. He was right for his species, for every species in the Union, but not for humans. Dr. Sora brought up comparative scans. We evolved this ability over millions of years. Tool use, throwing weapons while running, coordinating complex hand movements for crafting and building. Our brains developed the ability to multitask physically in ways that other species never needed. Why doesn't anyone know this? Oh, the medical data is all in the files, but it's neurological research, not military doctrine. Who reads biology papers when studying combat? Dr. Sora sat back. Besides, humans have only been in the Union for 2 years. Most species are still figuring out that we can't or sense magnetic fields. Our neural advantages haven't been relevant to anyone. They're relevant now. Are they, or are you just frustrated with your instructor? Dr. Sora's expression turned serious. I understand what you're thinking, but theory and practice are different things. Yes, human brains can theoretically handle dual wielding, but you're one cadet. The galactic military has 3,000 years of combat experience. Maybe there are other factors, tactics, energy efficiency, battlefield coordination. Maybe they're right that it doesn't work in real combat. Or maybe they never tested it with human neurology. That's a big assumption. Can I ask you something, Doctor? Have you ever seen dual weapon combat? Real combat, not historical videos. No. Then how do they know it doesn't work for humans if no human has tried it here? Dr. Sora was quiet for a moment. What are you planning? I'm going to request a demonstration, a sanctioned sparring match. Against whom? Instructor. The doctor's eyes widened. That's insane. He's been teaching combat for 200 years. 4 arms, 4 weapons if he wants them. He won't use 4. That's the point. He'll use 2 because his brain works like every other species. Met her gaze. I'm not trying to prove I'm a better fighter. I'm trying to prove that human biology allows something they think is impossible. If you lose, you'll just confirm their beliefs. Worse, you'll look foolish. If I don't try, we'll never know the truth. Dr. Sora studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. If you're going to do this, do it right. I'll help you prepare. We can run neural response tests, optimize your reaction pathways. But this isn't a game. Won't go easy on you just because you're trying to prove a point. I know. And if you lose? Then I lose, but at least I'll have tried something no one else dared to try. Headed for the door, then paused. Doctor, when you were studying medicine on Earth, did anyone tell you that humans couldn't become surgeons because our hands shake too much? What? No, that's absurd. Exactly, because we tested it and proved we could do it. The galaxy thinks dual wielding is impossible because every species that tried it failed, but none of them were human. He left the laboratory with renewed determination. That night, submitted a formal request through the Academy's combat challenge system. It was a legitimate protocol. Any cadet could request supervised combat training with an instructor to demonstrate unorthodox techniques. The request went to his office. The response came back within an hour. Request: the Academy does not waste resources on demonstrations of impossible techniques. Found in the training hall, practicing forms with 2 training swords. I heard rejected your request. He did. So what now? Executed a spinning attack, both blades moving in different arcs. Now I challenge him publicly. Academy regulations say an instructor must accept a challenge if issued in front of witnesses, and if the cadet can demonstrate basic competence in the proposed technique. You're going to embarrass yourself. Maybe, or maybe I'm going to change how the entire galaxy thinks about combat. He lowered the swords. Will you help me? Smiled. Someone has to keep you from getting killed. When do we do this? Tomorrow during open training. Maximum witnesses. You're crazy. Probably agreed, but I'm crazy with evidence. The training arena was packed. Word had spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. A human cadet planned to challenge Instructor using forbidden dual-weapon technique. Cadets from every species crowded the observation decks. Some came to learn, others came to watch what they expected would be an amusing failure. Stood in the center of the combat floor, two training swords in his hands. His heart pounded, but his grip was steady. He had spent all night practicing, remembering every lesson from his years of training on Earth. Muscle memory, his old instructor had always said, lives deeper than thought. Stood at the edge of the arena with Nam, a human engineer who had volunteered to monitor the match sensors. Readings are good, said quietly. All safety systems active. If things go bad, the arena will freeze both fighters. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, replied. She glanced at Song, the combat medic standing ready nearby. Stay sharp. Entered from the opposite side. His forearms were clearly visible, two holding practice swords, two empty. The instructor's expression was unreadable. He had tried to refuse this challenge but had invoked academy regulations perfectly. In front of 60 witnesses, he had demonstrated complex dual-sword forms that showed clear competence, had no choice but to accept. This is foolish, Cadet Park said, his voice carrying across the arena. I am giving you one final chance to withdraw. There is no shame in recognizing your limitations. And there is no wisdom in accepting limits without testing them, replied. He bowed respectfully, a gesture from Earth. I request this match not to disrespect you, Instructor, but to discover truth. A figure appeared on the upper observation deck, Commandant, the station commander. The tall, crystalline being rarely attended training matches. His presence meant this demonstration had attracted serious attention. Match rules announced. First to 3 touches or first to yield. No lethal strikes. Safety systems will intervene if necessary. Cadet Park, you may use your 2 swords. I will match you 2 swords, 2 arms, agreed. Agreed. The referee, a floating whisperkin, activated the arena boundary. A light field shimmered into existence, marking the combat zone. Fighters ready. Begin on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Engage. Moved first, closing the distance with frightening speed. His 2 swords came high and low, a classic pincer attack that had defeated countless opponents. Brought both his blades up, crossing them to catch the high strike while stepping back from the low. The clash echoed through the arena. Felt the impact shudder through both arms, was incredibly strong. First lesson, said, pressing the attack. 2 weapons means divided strength. Each of your blocks is half-powered. He was right. Crossed swords held the high blade, but barely. He had to give ground, circling away. Pursued, his movements efficient and precise. 200 years of experience showed in every step. Tried to counterattack, slashing with his right sword while thrusting with his left. Response was instant. He blocked both strikes with a single sword while the other came darting towards ribs. First touch. 1-0, the referee announced. They reset to starting positions. Side stung where the practice sword had tagged him. The safety systems had prevented real injury, but the point was valid. You fight like 2 separate people, said. Your right hand attacks, then your left hand attacks. This is not dual wielding, this is taking turns. Knew the instructor was right. He had been thinking about each sword individually, commanding them like tools. That wasn't how it worked in his tournaments back home. He closed his eyes briefly, remembering. Don't think about 2 swords, think about the fight. The swords are just extensions of your intent. Ready, the referee asked. Ready, confirmed. Engage. This time attacked first. His right sword went high, but he wasn't just swinging a blade. He was creating an angle, forcing to respond. The instructor's block was perfect, exactly where expected it. Because while his right sword drew the block, his left sword was already moving low, following a completely different timing, aimed at a completely different target. Had to twist, bringing his second sword down in an emergency block. He stopped his left blade, but the move left him off balance. Pressed forward. Now his hands were working together but independently, his right sword maintaining pressure up high, keeping his attention while his left probed for openings below. It wasn't 2 separate attacks anymore. It was 1 attack with 2 tools. Better, acknowledged, recovering his stance. You're learning. They circled each other. The crowd had gone silent, watching intently. This wasn't the quick defeat everyone had expected. Attacked with a complex pattern, high, low, middle, spinning. Each strike flowed into the next with perfect form. Swords moved to intercept, but he couldn't block everything. A blade slipped past his guard and touched his shoulder. 2-0, the referee called. Stepped back, breathing hard. Was better than anyone he had ever faced. 4 arms or 2, the skill was overwhelming. Maybe this whole idea had been arrogant. maybe the galaxy was right. His voice cut through his doubt. Stop thinking, let your hands remember. Let your hands remember. The words from his old training. Muscle memory lives deeper than thought. Looked down at his two swords. For 10 years he had trained with these weapons. His hands knew what to do. He had been trying to control them to consciously command each movement. That was the mistake. Final point said, "Are you ready to continue?" "Yes." "Engage." Stop thinking. His right hand swept up to parry, not because he told it to, but because it saw the incoming blade and reacted. His left hand countered low for the same reason, pure trained reflex. Swords came faster, testing him. Response wasn't conscious anymore. His brain wasn't splitting focus between two weapons. It was reading one opponent, and both hands were responding with independent but coordinated action. Eyes widened slightly. The change in fighting was sudden and dramatic. Before, the human had been clumsy, telegraphing his moves. Now each sword moved with its own purpose, creating overlapping defense patterns that were difficult to penetrate. Began to see it, the pattern that made dual-wielding work. His right sword didn't have to be as strong as a two-handed grip. It just had to cover its angle. Whilst attention tracked the right blade, the left was already cutting from a different vector. The instructor had to process two separate threats coming at different timings, different angles, different rhythms. For the first time in the match went defensive. His two swords wove a barrier blocking his attacks, but he was reacting now, not controlling the fight. Right sword came high in a feint. His block moved to intercept, and his right sword changed direction mid-swing, dropping low while his left sword came high from the other side. The crossover attack, a technique that required both hands to move in opposite directions simultaneously. Blocked the left sword but couldn't adjust fast enough for the right. The blade touched his chest plate. 2-1. The crowd erupted in shocked noise. Cadets from a dozen species were standing, pointing, talking rapidly to each other. The human had scored against. Impossible had just become possible. They reset. His expression had changed. This was no longer an instructor humoring a student. This was a warrior facing an actual challenge. Impressive, Cadet Park. You found your rhythm, but rhythm can be broken. The final engagement was fierce. Abandoned teaching mode and fought seriously using feints, false openings, and techniques meant to confuse. Struggled to keep up. His swords moved constantly. Block, parry, deflect, attack, retreat, counter. Sweat poured down his face. Then he saw it. His pattern. The instructor's two swords always moved in related arcs because his brain coordinated them as a pair. Beautiful and efficient, but predictable. When the high sword came from the right, the low sword would come from the left to maintain balance. Swords didn't have that limitation. His right hand could attack right high while his left attacked right low, both blades coming from the same side, breaking the mirror pattern that's instincts expected. He executed the move. His defensive position was perfect for a traditional dual sword attack. It was completely wrong for what did. Both human blades came from the right, one high and one low, converging on the same target zone from different angles. Swords crossed to block both, a strong defense. But the crossing position left his left side completely open. Right sword, the high one, bounced off the block and immediately redirected, whipping around in a backhand strike that came from an angle couldn't see. Touch right ribs. 2-2. Complete silence in the arena. Then Commandant began to make a sound that the translators rendered as applause. The crowd joined in, creating a thunder of noise from dozens of different species. Lowered his swords. Match to draw, he announced. Cadet Park has demonstrated competent dual-weapon technique. He approached and extended one of his four hands. I was wrong. This is not impossible. It is merely uniquely human. 3 days after the match, was summoned to Commandant's office. He expected discipline for disrupting academy protocols. Instead, he found a room full of senior officers from multiple species, all studying holographic displays of his fight with. Cadet Park, Commandant gestured to a chair. Sit, we have questions. One of the officers, a general, pointed at a frozen moment in the recording. Here, your right sword moves clockwise while your left moves counterclockwise. Simultaneously, how is your brain processing these opposing rotations? I don't think about it, sir, admitted. My hands just know what to do. That's what concerns us, another officer said. This one was, her silver skin reflecting the hololights. If you're not consciously controlling both weapons, how do you coordinate them? The same way you walk without thinking about each step. Dr. Sora Hand's voice came from the doorway. She entered with a data pad. I've been running neural scans on Cadet Park with his permission. May I present findings? Commandant nodded. Dr. Sora activated a holographic display of his brain during combat. Notice the activity in both hemispheres. Unlike other species, where one hemisphere dominates during weapon combat, humans show balanced bilateral activation. His left brain controls the right sword, his right brain controls the left sword. They operate in parallel, not in sequence. This is documented in other species, the general objected. We all have bilateral brain structures. Yes, but you use them for redundancy and backup. Humans use them for parallel processing. Our evolution required it. We threw spears with one hand while carrying tools in the other. We climbed trees using independent limb coordination. Our corpus evolved to be significantly larger than any known species specifically to handle this cross-hemisphere communication. A message alert flashed on the main screen. Commandant opened it, and his crystalline face somehow conveyed surprise. Admiral is requesting emergency access to this meeting. The human fleet commander, the officer leaned forward. Why would he? The holodisplay shifted, showing Admiral's face. The middle-aged human had steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. Commandant, I apologize for the interruption. I've been monitoring Cadet Park's demonstration. We need to discuss certain classified matters. Admiral, this is highly irregular. I know, but circumstances have changed. Cadet Park's match has been viewed by over 2 million people across the Academy network. Questions are being asked. I'd rather control this information release than have it discovered piecemeal. Admiral's expression was serious. The human delegation to the Galactic Union has been withholding certain combat capabilities during our probationary period. We believed it was prudent to avoid appearing threatening while we established diplomatic relations. You hid military advantages. The general's mandibles clicked sharply. That could be considered espionage. Or reasonable caution, Admiral replied. Humanity is the member of a civilization that's 3,000 years old. We're one planet among thousands. Would you have shown all your cards immediately? Commandant's tone was neutral. What has been hidden, Admiral? Human special forces have been dual-wielding in classified operations for 15 years. Not with swords, with firearms, energy weapons, and close combat tools. We learned early that our bilateral neural coordination gave us advantages in certain combat scenarios, but we kept it quiet. The room erupted in multilingual protests. Admiral waited for silence. We weren't trying to deceive you. We were trying not to frighten you. Humanity's history is, he paused, choosing words carefully, violent. We fought ourselves for thousands of years. When we reached the stars and found you, we wanted to be seen as peaceful, not as a species that could optimize killing in ways you'd never considered. And now, Commandant asked. Now, one brave cadet has demonstrated publicly what we've been doing secretly. The information is out. We can either acknowledge it and help the Union understand it, or we can continue hiding and damage trust further. Entered the office at that moment. The instructor bowed to the assembled officers. Apologies for lateness. I came as requested. Instructor, Admiral said from the display. You fought Cadet Park, professional assessment. The technique is genuine, said without hesitation. Not only does it work, it's highly effective against opponents trained in traditional doctrine. Human dual-wielding creates attack patterns that our tactical systems aren't designed to counter. In a real combat scenario, it would be devastating. Devastating against Union forces. The general's tone was sharp. Devastating against anyone who expects conventional weapons combat, clarified, but also devastating for Union forces to use against enemies. This isn't a threat to the Union, it's an advantage for the Union if we choose to adapt our doctrines. That's a significant if, Commandant said. 3,000 years of military doctrine would need revision. A new voice joined the conversation, appeared on another holodisplay. The military theorist was broadcasting from Earth. Not necessarily, Commandant. I've been studying Cadet Park's match. Other species can't dual-wield, but they can learn to fight against dual-wielders. The patterns are unusual but not random. They can be analyzed, predicted, countered. This is an opportunity for the entire Union to evolve tactically. Dr. Sora added, and there may be other human abilities we haven't fully cataloged. Our evolution was unique. There could be more surprises. Sat quietly, feeling overwhelmed. This had started as a simple question about training methods. Now he was in a room with admirals and generals discussing galactic military policy. Cadet Park, Commandant addressed him directly. Did you know about the classified dual-wielding programs when you challenged Instructor? No, sir. I only knew what I learned on Earth in tournaments. You challenged 3,000 years of military wisdom based on tournament experience. Yes, sir. The Commandant made a sound like laughter. Admirably human, reckless but admirably so. He looked around the room. Recommendations. Full disclosure, Admiral said immediately. Release the research. Share the combat footage. Let Union scientists and military theorists study this. We've been members for 2 years. It's time to contribute, not just observe. The officer nodded. Agreed, but we'll need training programs. If human cadets can dual-wield, the rest of our forces need to know how to fight alongside them and against opponents who might copy the technique. I volunteer to help, said. Everyone turned to look at him. I was defeated by this technique. That makes me qualified to teach others how to face it. And, he looked at, I would like to understand it better. Perhaps this old instructor can still learn new lessons. I have a proposal, said from his display. Create an experimental combat unit. Human dual-wielders with mixed species support. Test the technique in actual tactical scenarios, not just sparring matches. Develop counter-strategies. Write new doctrine based on empirical results. Commandant considered for a long moment. This will require approval from the Galactic Military Council. They won't be happy that humans hid capabilities. They'll be less happy if they find out we're still hiding more, Admiral said bluntly. Better to be honest now. And frankly, after watching that match, I think the Council will be more interested in the possibilities than angry about the secret. Very well, I'll forward this to the Council with recommendations. Commandant looked at. Cadet Park, you may have changed military history today. How does that feel? Terrifying, sir. Good, fear keeps you alert. The Commandant gestured to the door. Dismissed, and Cadet, excellent work. Your instructor was right to be humbled, so was I. Outside the office was waiting. So, are you expelled or promoted? Neither. I think I just became a test subject. A new cadet approached them, Bay, one of the top students in Special Operations training. Park, I heard what happened in there. Is it true you're forming a dual-wielding unit? I'm not forming anything. I just asked a question. Well, when they do form it, I want in. I trained in back on Earth. 2 sticks, same principle as 2 swords. She grinned. If we're going to revolutionize galactic combat, might as well be part of it. More human cadets gathered, all talking at once. Others whose names barely knew. They had all seen the match. They all wanted to try. Approached last, looking embarrassed. I owe you an apology. I told you not to make waves. You made a tsunami instead. I just wanted to understand why the rule existed. And in the process you proved the rule was wrong, at least for us. Extended his hand. Whatever comes next, I'm with you. We all are. Shook his hand, looking at the growing crowd of human cadets. A week ago, he'd been one student with a question. Now he was somehow at the center of a military revolution. Walked past, accompanied by several other instructors. He paused. Cadet Park, training begins tomorrow, 6th hour. Bring your swords. I have 200 years of technique to teach you, and you have something very new to teach me. It will be an interesting exchange. As the instructor left, laughed. You know what's amazing? You didn't just prove humans can dual-wield. You proved the entire galaxy can still learn. That might be even more important. Looked at the 2 practice swords still hanging from his belt. Define can't, he thought. Sometimes the only way to define it is to prove it doesn't exist. 6 weeks of intensive training had transformed the human combat cadets. Stood in the practice hall, watching execute a perfect dual-sword defense pattern while attacked with all 4 arms. The instructor had modified his own technique, using all his limbs independently in ways that would have been impossible before studying human neurology. Excellent adaptation, called, stepping back. You're learning to read 4-armed opponents. That will serve you well. The experimental combat unit had grown to 15 humans, all training daily with mixed species support teams. The Galactic Military Council had approved the program with surprising enthusiasm. Sanalysis had convinced them this wasn't just about human advantage, it was about advancing everyone's tactical capabilities. Then the alarm sounded. Red lights flashed throughout the Orbital Combat Institute. Communication device activated with Commandant's voice. All combat personnel to stations. We have incoming hostile forces. The Ravager fleet has breached the sector. The Ravagers had read about them in tactical briefings. Pirates, raiders, outcasts from a dozen species who had banded together outside Union law. They attacked stations, stole supplies, and disappeared into uncharted space. How many ships? Demanded, his 4 hands already reaching for real weapons, not training gear. 47 craft, Commandant replied. They're demanding we surrender all supplies and evacuate. We have 12 defense craft, but they're outnumbered. Estimated combat in 14 minutes. Squad assembled in the armory. Now officially appointed as squad leader for the experimental unit, distributed weapons. Energy blades fully charged, armor suits combat rated. This isn't training anymore, people. Checked her twin short swords, identical energy weapons that hummed with blue light. What's the defensive plan? Standard Union doctrine, replied. Our ships engage theirs in space. If they break through, we defend key stations. Hold the cargo bays, prevent boarding. Standard doctrine assumes standard tactics, said, loading his equipment. The Ravagers know Union tactics. They've been raiding for years. Which is why we're not following standard doctrine, a new voice said. Admiral strode into the armory, dressed in combat armor. I took a transport here 2 days ago for inspections. Lucky timing. He looked at the assembled human cadets. You've trained for 6 weeks in experimental combat. Time to find out if it works under real conditions. The combat medic raised her hand. Sir, with respect, we're still cadets. Shouldn't actual soldiers handle the defense? Actual soldiers are in the ships fighting in space. Down here we have station security, good troops but thin spread. And we have you, 15 humans who can do things the enemy won't expect. Admiral activated a holographic map of the station. The Ravagers use overwhelming force in boarding actions. They concentrate numbers at key points, using standard galactic formations. We're going to counter that with something they've never seen. Entered with 3 other instructors, all carrying weapons. Commandant has authorized Academy combat staff to fight alongside the experimental unit. We will provide support. The plan is simple, Admiral explained. When they board, and they will board, we let them think they're facing standard resistance. Then we hit them with dual-wielding tactics in close quarters where they can't retreat. The deck shuddered. Explosions echoed through the station's hull. They're here, Commandant's voice crackled over communications. Multiple breach points. Cargo Bay 7, Residential Deck 4, Engineering Section 2, boarding parties incoming. Experimental unit, you take Cargo Bay 7, Admiral commanded. Your instructors support them. I'll coordinate from command. Move. They ran through corridors as the station shook from impacts. Emergency bulkheads sealed sections behind them. Other defenders rushed past, security, engineers carrying weapons, soldiers taking defensive positions. Cargo Bay 7 was massive, filled with supply containers stacked 5 meters high, perfect terrain for ambush. Squad spread out, taking positions behind cover. His 2 energy blades felt weightless in his hands, their blue glow casting shadows across the metal floor. Contact in 30 seconds, warned from his position. Sensors show 40 Ravagers, mixed species, heavy weapons. 40 against 15, muttered from behind a container. Great odds. Better than they think, replied, checking her sight lines. The cargo bay's outer door exploded inward. Armored figures poured through the breach, Ravagers in mismatched equipment, carrying weapons from a dozen different worlds. They moved in standard formation, spreading to cover angles, following 3,000-year-old tactical doctrine. Hold fire, whispered into the team channel. The Ravagers advanced, confident. They had overwhelming numbers. This would be easy. Waited behind his container, both swords ready. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. 6 weeks ago, he had challenged an instructor to prove a point. Now he was about to prove that same point in real combat. Now shouted. The human cadets attacked from all sides, vaulted over his container, both blades igniting in full combat mode. The nearest Ravager, a 6-limbed creature, raised its weapon to fire. His right sword knocked the weapon aside while his left came from the opposite angle, striking the armored joint. The Ravager went down, stunned. Chaos erupted in the cargo bay. The Ravagers had expected standard defenders, one weapon, predictable patterns. Instead, they faced humans moving like whirlwinds, each with 2 independently controlled blades creating impossible attack patterns. Fought 3 Ravagers simultaneously. Her short swords moved in constant motion, never where the enemy expected. When one Ravager blocked her right sword, her left was already coming from behind, forcing him to twist. The twist exposed him to her right sword coming back around. She was one fighter creating the pressure of 3. Used her longer reach, keeping enemies at distance with one blade while the other protected her flanks. Fought with a sword and shield combination, but he wielded the shield offensively, bashing with it while his sword cut from unexpected angles. The Ravagers tried to adapt, but their tactics were based on fighting opponents who thought like them. One weapon, one focus. Against humans whose brains processed dual combat streams simultaneously, their formations collapsed. And his instructors provided crucial support. The instructor had learned from his match with. He used his 4 arms in pairs, creating stable defensive walls that protected the humans when they overextended. Other instructors covered flanks, prevented encirclement, and maintained battlefield control. Fall back to the containers, the Ravager commander. He tried to organize retreat, but falling back in good order required discipline and practice. The pirates had neither against this style of combat. Pressed forward with, they fought side by side, their 4 swords creating a moving barrier that advanced steadily. When enemies tried to flank left, his left sword was already there. When they tried right, right blade intercepted. Their coordination wasn't telepathic. They had simply trained together long enough to predict each other's movements. Massive Ravager, nearly 3 meters tall, charged with a two-handed maul. The weapon swung down with crushing force, crossed both swords overhead, catching the maul between the blades. The impact drove him to one knee, but his crossed swords held. While the Ravager struggled to pull the maul free, his left sword slipped sideways and tagged the giant's leg armor. The combat suit's safety systems registered the hit and locked the leg, sending the Ravager crashing down. "They're breaking," called. She was right. The Ravager formation was disintegrating into individual fighters, all trying to retreat. "Let them go," ordered. "Secure the bay, don't pursue." The remaining Ravagers fled through the breach they'd created. Within minutes, explosions sounded as they abandoned their boarding craft and retreated to their ships. Admiral's voice came over communications. "All stations report. Boarding parties repelled. The Ravagers are withdrawing. Our ships are pursuing." Lowered his swords, breathing hard. Around him, his squad was checking each other for injuries. Miraculously, everyone was alive. Bruised, exhausted, but alive. Approached, his 4 hands resting on his weapons. 40 enemies against 15 cadets. By traditional calculation, you should have been overwhelmed. Instead, you won decisively. "We had help," said, gesturing to the instructors. "You had support. There's a difference. The victory was yours." This expression showed something like pride. "I have taught combat for 200 years. Today, I watch students apply 6 weeks of training to defeat experienced fighters. This dual-wielding technique, it's more than just unusual. In close quarters, against opponents trained in traditional methods, it's devastating." Commandant's hologram appeared in the cargo bay. "Experimental combat unit, excellent work. Casualty reports from all sections are coming in. You had 0 fatalities, lowest injury rate, and highest enemy suppression numbers. The Ravagers are requesting ceasefire and withdrawal. They've had enough." "Sir, how did the other sections fare?" asked. "Mixed results. Heavy fighting, several injuries. But your sector was their main assault point, 40 attackers. They expected to break through easily and access the main station. You stopped them cold." The commandant paused. "The Galactic Military Council is watching the battle recordings now. I suspect you'll be hearing from them soon." 2 days later, stood before a holographic assembly of the Galactic Military Council. Representatives from all 47 member species watched as Admiral presented combat footage and analysis. "The conclusion is clear," Admiral stated. "Human dual-wielding works in real combat conditions. Not just works, excels. But its true value isn't just as a human technique, it's as a catalyst for tactical evolution." Appeared on another display. "I've analyzed the battle recordings. The Ravagers used optimal traditional tactics. They should have won. They lost because we introduced a variable they couldn't process, independent bilateral combat streams. This proves our doctrines, while effective, have blind spots." "So what do you propose?" asked a council member, a crystalline being like Commandant. "First, acknowledge that different species have different capabilities. Humans can dual-wield effectively. This is fact, not theory. Second, update training across Union forces to recognize and counter this style. Third, explore what other species-specific advantages we might have overlooked in 3,000 years of assumed uniformity." A council member spoke up. "This opens concerning questions. If humans have hidden this capability, what else has been hidden? What other species have unique advantages they haven't shared?" "Many, probably," Admiral replied bluntly. "Not from malice, but from assuming everyone else already knew, or from assuming it wasn't important. We need systematic review of all member species' biological capabilities, not for weapons development but for complete understanding." "The human cadet," another council member said, looking at Cadet Park. "This all began with your question to an instructor, correct?" "Yes," council member replied. "You challenged 3,000 years of military wisdom. That was either very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both, sir." That got laughs from several council members. "What would you say to other cadets from other species who see our doctrines and wonder if they're absolute?" Thought carefully before answering. "I would say that questioning isn't disrespecting. The galaxy's wisdom came from testing and learning. If we stop testing, we stop learning. Maybe our ancestors were wrong about some things. Maybe they were right about most things. The only way to know is to ask why and then test the answer." The council members conferred among themselves in multiple languages. Finally, the lead member spoke. "The council recognizes dual-wielding as a valid combat technique for species with appropriate neural architecture. Instructor, you are hereby appointed to head a new tactical research division. Your task: identify and document species-specific combat advantages across the Union. Cadet Park, you and your experimental unit are promoted to active special operations status." You'll work with Instructor to train others and develop countertactics. Council said hesitantly, I'm still a cadet, I'm not qualified. You qualified yourself by proving everyone wrong, the council leader said. Sometimes the best qualification is the willingness to question. Congratulations, Specialist Park. Try not to revolutionize anything else this week. We need time to process this one. 3 months later, stood in the academy training hall watching new cadets, human and non-human, practice combat techniques, taught defense against dual wielding. Human instructors including and taught dual wielding to species capable of learning it. Some species could manage limited dual weapon use with practice, though none matched human proficiency. More importantly, the entire curriculum had been redesigned. Instead of teaching one universal doctrine, the academy now taught adaptive tactics that recognized different species had different strengths. Still feels strange, said, joining on the observation deck. 6 months ago, we were asking permission to try something different. Now it's standard training. Not standard, corrected. Just accept it as possible, that's all I wanted. You wanted to prove the instructor wrong about dual wielding. No, I wanted to prove that can't isn't always permanent. Sometimes it's just haven't figured out how yet. Below them, a human cadet executed a perfect dual blade combination, while a cadet practiced the counter technique. Neither could have imagined this scenario 6 months ago. The Ravagers are requesting to join the Union, mentioned. After their defeat, they realized fighting against us was less profitable than fighting with us. Because we beat them. Because we showed them something they thought was impossible. Turns out pirates appreciate innovation. Grinned. Who knows what other impossible things are waiting to be discovered. Watch the training continue, each cadet learning in ways that suited their species, all working together despite their differences. The instructor had said no species could dual wield. One question, one challenge, one match had changed that absolute truth. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that dual wielding was possible, but that impossible was just another word for unexplored. And the galaxy was full of things waiting to be explored by someone brave enough or foolish enough to ask why not. He picked up his 2 practice swords and headed down to the training floor. There was always more to learn, and now, finally, everyone was willing to learn together. Define can't, he thought with a smile. Turned out the definition was simpler than expected, the point where you stop trying. And humans the galaxy was learning rarely stopped trying.